So I want to take this opportunity to welcome everybody. I'm so delighted that everybody's here. This is the first of 5 of our new programs called Limnot, Yameinu, Hoda, Graceful Aging. And it's a series of programs made possible in part by a grant from our own Pacific Southwest region of the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism and the Joseph P. Reardon Home. We will have a chance for discussion. I'm going to eventually turn it over to Rabbi Sacks to go into a dialogue with Rabbi Geller. So if you have questions, please put your questions in the chat, in the general chat. Please do not send them to either rabbi because they will not have the opportunity to look at them. We will have at least one time, if not 2 times, to look at your questions. Please keep yourself on mute. And at the end of the program, I will tell you more about the upcoming ones. So I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Sacks, the rabbi of Congregation Am Hayam.
Thank you, Fran. Welcome, everyone. Bruchim Habayim. It's so good to be together and so good to see you and to see some new faces, as well as familiar ones and people from various places who have come for this special series, and particularly this first one, where I will be in conversation with Rabbi Laura Geller. Rabbi Geller was the 3rd woman ordained by Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. She was the director of the American Jewish Congress branch in Los Angeles. She was the founding chair of the City of Beverly Hills Human Relations Committee. In 1994, Rabbi Geller became the first female rabbi to lead a major metropolitan congregation, Temple Emanuel, in Beverly Hills. She now serves as Rabbi Emerita there. She was also the first female rabbi to become Hillel director at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, where she served for about 14 years. In 2000, she was part of the very first group of rabbis to attend the Jewish meditation program of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. Rabbi Geller has twice been named as one of Newsweek's 50 most influential rabbis in America, and was named as the PBS Next Avenue as one of the 50 2017 influencers on aging. Rabbi Geller was featured in the PBS documentary Jewish Americans. She is the author of numerous articles in books and journals. She was on the editorial board of the Torah, A Woman's Commentary. She serves on the board of Co-Generate, which brings older and younger and everyone in between together to solve problems, to bridge divides, and co-create the future. She is on the board of the Jewish Women's Archive, and she is on the board of B3, the Jewish Boomer Project. Her current project is creating the Synagogue Village Network, which you can find online at synagoguevillagenetwork.org. I have the absolute joy, Jewish joy, and to be a member of Rabbi Geller's minyan at Temple Emanuel when I lived in the area, and went not to the main sanctuary minyan, but the special minyan she created that met every Shabbos morning. And I went there when I wasn't working on Shabbat. And it was really a complete joy to be part of that wonderful, warm community, to have Rabbi Geller's wisdom and insight and encouragement to everyone there. And so being a devoted member of that has stayed with me, and it is with great delight that I present to you Rabbi Geller for our conversation today. So Rabbi Geller, welcome, Brucha Haba'ah. And our half of our title is Graceful Aging, and I really just wanted to start off by asking you what comes to mind, what comes up for you, how do you understand the idea of graceful aging?
Well, I think that maybe first I'll tell you what the rules are in order to experience graceful aging, and then we can talk a little bit about what that actually means.
Great.
So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here and to reconnect with you, Rabbi Sacks. That's really a joy, so I appreciate that. In this month of Adar, which began a couple of weeks ago, our tradition says when Adar begins, joy increases. It's a hard time to really know what joy means, given that the world is so complicated. And I think that part of what joy means is that we sit with the truth of complications. That joy is not just happiness, it's not just dressing up in Purim costumes, but it's also sitting with the truth of what is and letting and being fully present, that really is what joy is all about. I think that the same thing is true about graceful aging. Graceful aging ultimately means that you are present to all of the different challenges and opportunities that come at this stage of your life, and that you see this time not as a time of decline, but as a time of opportunity. That is the kind of core of graceful aging. And then there are a few rules. The first rule about graceful aging is the 5-minute rule. 5-minute rule means you only get 5 minutes to do an organ recital when you are sitting with your friends. An organ recital is when everybody goes around and complains about what's wrong with different organs, right? We have to do that. That's part of what Growing Older is about, but you only get to do it for 5 minutes, then you have to stop. And the second 5-minute rule is those of us who have grandchildren love to show pictures of grandchildren. You get to do that for 5 minutes, but after that, that's enough. It's very important to notice that the stereotype is that all Jews, all older Jews, are totally happily engaged with their grandchildren. For some people that's true, and for other people it's not true. Some people don't have grandchildren. Some people don't have the relationships with their children or grandchildren that they wish that they had. And it's very important to be sensitive to that and to acknowledge the shame that some people feel that they can't participate in those kinds of conversations. So we need to be sensitive to that at the same time that we can share those pictures. So those are the two 5-minute rules. The other advice, and I'm sort of jumping to the end of a conversation here, is a secret to graceful aging is to have younger friends. That's very important. And a congregation, as ideally a diverse congregation, is an opportunity where you know people who are older than you and you know people who are younger than you are. And so to increase the possibilities within your community of making younger friends, not easy, but very important. Really the bottom line is to have a sense of humor. So if you have a sense of humor, whatever it is that you're challenged by, you are able to see the humor in it. And even if it's horrible, there's still some humor in it. So those are some of the things that I would say are part of graceful aging.
Thank you. Those are just all gems for all of us to keep in mind wherever we are in our journey now. I wanted to shift to a specific area, and that is balance. I know on the one hand, we're encouraged to have mindfulness and meditation, but on the other hand, we're also encouraged to be moving and to do exercise. And physical exercise is a little different than taking time to think and feel and reflect. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how we balance those two sort of different modalities, particularly as we age.
So I guess another sort of bottom line is that no matter what, you keep moving. You keep moving through whatever is going on. You keep moving your body. And in my experience, moving is just another kind of spiritual practice, right? I just came back from the Institute for Jewish Spirituality's silent retreat, where we experienced different kinds of mindfulness. One was prayer. One was Jewish study. One was embodied practice, yoga and going for walks. One was art, imagining using art not because we're great artists and we are going to compare what we have created with somebody else, but to just take a piece of paper and to sort of see what comes out of it. So all of those are experiences that are part of mindfulness. So balance means taking care of yourself in all those different ways. And one of the difficulties actually of growing older is our bodies change. And it's not uncommon to feel like your body is betraying you. You know, you pass a mirror and you say, what is my mother doing here? You know, I mean, you see yourself in a mirror that's different from the way you think about yourself in your own mind. And it's very important to recognize that the alternative to growing older is being dead. And if you had the choice, you want to keep choosing being older with all of the challenges that comes with it. I know people for whom the decision to get a cane or a walker is a very difficult decision. Maybe you're a little embarrassed by it. Maybe you want to pretend that you don't need that kind of help. I think that that's not a good strategy because the truth is we need that kind of help. There was a time in my life when I would get on an airplane and I would push my bags, you know, on top, and somebody said, you know, ma'am, can I help you? I would say, well, you know, don't be silly, I can do this. I welcome that now. It's so nice when somebody sees that I am, in fact, a person who might need some help getting those bags up there. Someday I will be a person who needs a walker. It will happen. I want to be able at that moment not to feel embarrassed, but to feel grateful for my body, for all the times that I didn't need a walker, and to feel grateful to whoever invented walkers, the you know, the medical stuff that we have that enables us to keep moving. A cane is that, a walker is that. Who knows what other kinds of wonderful things people are going to create. I just recently put bars in my shower. I'm grateful that somebody invented the idea of bars in a shower. And although I don't really need it now, I do know the dangers of falling, and I don't want to be stupid. I want to be careful. So I think all of that is about moving, keeping moving, and moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, when Stephen and I just moved to the desert, we said to each other, you know, and we're both in, thank God, in relatively good health. But we said to each other, let's not get a place that has more than one story. Let's have something where it's all one floor, and not have to do stairs. And our previous home, we were up and down so many times. And we don't really need to worry about it now, but thinking ahead, I think we're very grateful that we were sort of in sync with your advice, Rabbi Geller, in sort of thinking about you know, what the future is. And we too have bars now on our in our shower, etc. I wonder. I just wanted to follow up on your comment.
I want to say one other thing.
Sure.
The conversations about growing older have been changing significantly as such a huge population of people are growing older.
Yes.
Just to like share the statistics, adults over 65 are projected to outnumber children under the age of 18 for the first time in US history by 2034. Think about that. 1/5 of the total United States population, about 88 million people, will be 65 and older by 2050. So like it's happening. I mean, this cohort is just huge. And there's a younger cohort as well. So figuring out ways to be together, share together, all of that is quite important. But it used to be that people thought about that you were sick or you were well. It turns out that many of us are healthy with conditions, right? I might be healthy, but I might have diabetes, right? But that's a condition that I can manage. I might have cancer, but it's in remission, healthy with condition. I might be have a hip issue and I'm going to need surgery. I'm healthy, but with conditions. So that's a different way of thinking about growing older. We will all, at many stages of our life, but particularly as we get older, God willing, be healthy, but with conditions. And to plan for those conditions, like Rabbi Sacks just suggested, is actually very important. Another thing that's important is to notice that that how we think about growing older is important. It used to be that it was about chronological age, right? And what was old? Well, was it 55 when you first get that invitation to be part of the AARP? Is it 65 when you first, qualify for Medicare? Is it, as some famous person was apparently said, is it 10 years older than however old you are right now? Is that what growing older is? Is it when you live beyond when your parents lived? I mean, there are different ways of marking them. So chronological age is not necessarily a good way to talk about growing older. Another thing that people talk about is functional age, how you manage with daily tasks. And some people, their functional age, into their 80s, 90s, they're still kicking, right? Other people in their 40s and 50s, their functional age is limited. So how we think about age is very important. And another way that people are thinking about it now is not to talk about a lifespan, because the truth is that all of us are living 31 years longer than our grandparents did. There's a new stage of life between midlife, when we raised our families and had careers if we had them, and frail old age. This 31 years is not tacked on to the end of our life. It's not that we're going to be frail old agers for 31 years longer. It's that in between these two distinct stages is this new stage that didn't used to exist. That is a stage that, by the way, we don't really even know what to call it. And Rabbi Sacks, if it's okay, I'd like to sort of put that question out to all of you. How do you call yourself at this stage? What are some of the words that you use that you're comfortable with? Anybody want to suggest a word?
You're welcome to either put a word into the chat or to unmute and call out how you would call yourself in response to Rabbi Geller's. What, Daryl?
I'm retired.
Retired.
So that's a good word for someone who has worked at a job where they're paid, but not all of us have. So that is a word that works for you. Is it Daryl that spoke? That
Yes.
works for Daryl, but might not work for other people. What else? What other words?
Deborah put in the chat free retiree.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Nice.
Let me ask you a question. How many of you like the word senior? Raise your hand. I don't see. Okay, one. Okay, Deborah's sort of on the fence about it. Okay, I personally, Andrea, you like the word?
Depends what the other
what
word
about-
is.
Semi-senior.
Semi-senior, okay. The truth is, I particularly like that I get a senior discount when I go to the movies, now that I can go back to the movies. But a lot of people don't particularly like that word. On the other hand, it was not so bad being a senior in high school, right? Everybody looked up to you, right? So I mean, it's complicated, right? How many of you like the word elder? Deborah, you like it? Can you tell me why?
There's some sort of dignity and respect that goes along with that. And I feel like at our ages, we should feel that for ourselves and project that. You know, there's a lot we know, there's a lot we understand.
So Deborah is claiming something that religious traditions, ours and other religious traditions claim, which is to be an elder is something you aspire to, that elders are keepers of wisdom, right? On the other hand, many people don't like that word because it sounds too much like elderly. So I might want to be an elder in that I claim for myself that I am a woman of wisdom. My life experience has given me wisdom, although not everybody who is older is wise, we know that. But still, how do we bring back into a culture that makes fun of older people, that in fact one might want to aspire to be an elder? Abraham Joshua Heschel, the famous rabbi of the last century, said people are very anxious to create a financial income for growing older. They should also be interested in creating a spiritual income for growing older. A wise person, an elder, has a spiritual income that comes with paying attention to issues of growing older. Okay, other words that people like?
Marcia has in the chat active senior.
Okay, active senior, active older adult. All of those are words that are used. Other words that are used are chrysalis, that this is a stage of a chrysalis, that we are being sort of reborn as butterflies. What does that look like? Seasoned, experience. One that I particularly like is perennial. You know, keep blooming. Not some years not so good, some years better, but you know, I keep blooming. So these are words that are important to think about, because one of the things we learned from the women's movement many years ago is that if you can't name something, you can't get your mind around it. So first of all, we need to think about how we name the stage, and then we need to think about how we name ourselves, how we think about ourselves. And I know this is far from the questions Rabbi Sacks is asking, but one of the very important issues is the stereotypes that we have about growing older. So I'm not going to ask you to do this, or maybe I will. When you think about old being older, or growing older, what are some of the images that come to mind? Without judgment, just write them down in the chat. Everybody take a minute and write down one of those images. Okay, vulnerable. What else?
Yeah, don't hesitate to have your voice heard in the chat.
Knowledgeable. What else? Used to be little old lady in a rocking chair. Okay, good. What else? Gray-haired, bumbler, slower reaction. What else? Dependent. That's a big one for people, fear of being dependent. What else?
I think a little doddering or in a little maybe not always sharp-minded
So,
was the stereotype.
okay, frail, forgetful.
Mhm.
Okay, so there are negative stereotypes. And then there are positive stereotypes, as Deborah pointed out, wise, experienced, etc. One of the things that we need to recognize is that so many of us are reluctant, even in midlife, to admit that we're growing older or that we deserve help in certain situations. Or many of us, when we're younger, harbor the idea that older people are other, not us, not even future us. But it turns out, and this was really amazing, negative stereotypes about getting older actually impacts our mental and physical health, regardless of medical history, education level, or socioeconomic status. People with negative perceptions of aging have been found to have poorer memory and cognition and higher rates of cardiac disease. In other words, negative images correlate with bad outcomes. And there's a wonderful woman that you've been hearing about, because I think she just came out with a book, named Dr. Becca Levy from Yale, who discovered through studies that she did that if you can shift someone's mindset on aging from negative to positive, you give them an additional 7.5 years of life. I mean, this is quite important to notice.
So I have a question, and that's amazing to hear all of this. How do we? I think it's maybe more easily said than done for some people, because we want to stay positive, but yet as we go older, I wouldn't call it negative, but there are realities. If we have to give up driving at night, or we have to give up driving altogether, or we do need to ask for help, those kind of vulnerabilities, to use Ruthie's word, that we have to embrace and still try to be positive about. But I think it's challenging for some people, perhaps more than others, to remain positive as we continue to confront our vulnerabilities and changes.
I think all that is true. And I think here a synagogue is very important. The fact that you guys are doing this series is going to encourage you to think through how you think about growing older. So let's take giving up driving. I'm now working on a book, and Rabbi Sacks, I do want to say a few words about my other book, so you have to ask me about that.
I will definitely do that.
I'm now working on a book called Moments That Matter, Marking Transition in Midlife and Beyond. And I'm asking the question, what are the moments in your life as an older person, from midlife to frail old age, that you want to mark in some way? Some of them are sad moments, some of them are joyful moments. All of us know as Jews, there's lots of life cycle rituals in the early part of our life. There's bris, there's baby naming, there's bar mitzvah, there's confirmation, there's a wedding. In some cases, there's a divorce, right? What is the next life cycle ritual in Jewish tradition? Life cycle, something that we move from one stage of life to another. What's the next one? One answer might be to relive all that stuff with children or grandchildren. But again, not all of us have children and grandchildren, and we are more than simply parents and grandparents. So what's the next one that Jewish tradition offers?
Burial,
right? Funeral, right? Mm-hmm. And that's pretty ironic when you realize I, 73 years old, God willing, will live more years between when I first got married and my funeral than before, when I was a little girl till when I first got married, right? what are those moments? Our tradition teaches us divinity is present at every moment. We just have to stop and recognize it. That's what the tradition of 100 blessings a day are, right? So our tradition tells us, mark those moments. So somebody wrote in, well, what about an 83-year-old birthday? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You might think turning 83 sucks, or you might think, wow, I made it to 83. The Psalms say 70 years is a full life. So if you make it to 83, it's as though you're 13. Hence the tradition, not a law, but a tradition of celebrating your bar mitzvah again, or having a new one at 83. So what are those moments? So giving up your car. I live in Los Angeles. You guys live in Ventura. Cars are really important, and public transportation, not so great. It is really understood as a loss when you can't drive anymore. But what if your synagogue said anybody who is wise enough to know that it's not safe to drive anymore is honored in some way by the synagogue and is given some kind of a title or a status or whatever. And it happens in a synagogue service. Friends come to celebrate that person, and that person is acknowledged and thanked for being able to be wise. And if it happens in your synagogue, then the synagogue, it's on the synagogue to get them to shul, right? So how are you going to do that, right? And it turns out some of us have enough money to use ride shares. Some of us don't have smartphones, but there's this thing called go-go grandparents, where people that don't know how to use or don't have smartphones can set it up so that you make a phone call and then they call Uber or Lyft. And, you know, there are workarounds. Or if you're a wealthy congregation, you hire a van. Or if you are an intergenerational community, volunteers volunteer to drive people to shul. Or you partner with some other synagogue in Ventura and you figure out a way to do it. Or maybe there are social services in Ventura, there is in Beverly Hills. It's on you. People need community. They need to get to synagogue or wherever they need to go. What if we reframe some of these losses as signs of wisdom? I think that we could do that. And that's an important transformation of what used to be understood simply as loss to be one of wisdom.
I think it's wonderful, and I do think that so your suggestion of celebrating moments and reframing them as important times for the individual and community. I actually felt when I signed up for Medicare at 65 that was like a real life cycle moment for me. I just recently signed up for Social Security. And I felt like that was like, you know, to sort of acknowledge that state. And so I feel like I want to have a Misha Beirach or something to sort of honor the moment of transition for me.
Okay, so that gives you another opportunity, which is to recognize that ageism is real. There's internalized ageism that's really serious, but there's also just regular old ageism. You go to a restaurant and they don't see you, right? The younger people get we have power, us older adults. We vote, we're smart, we have expertise. We can be a political force so that, you know, Medicare might be in danger or Social Security, you know, what are the political things that matter to us that we should be advocating for? You know, I think this growing older universe is the next movement. You know, there was the women's movement, there was the civil rights movement, there was the anti-war movement, and this is the movement where we recognize that as the population ages, we need to be part of Governor Newsom's master plan on aging, right? And your congresspeople, whoever they are, care because you guys as a group of people are going to show up at the polls. So to think about that too. So these are not just moments that we want to celebrate as individuals, but these are things to notice that enable us to recognize that we still have agency and that that's important.
Thank you. Yes, really appreciate the fact that at any stage of our lives, but as we become agers, we really want to also make sure that we're advocating for ourselves and each other. Really important. I actually just joined for seniors a texting bank, and Texting Tuesdays it's called, and every Tuesday I spend an hour and they give me people to text about the importance of making sure we're registered and making sure we vote, because we have interests as a block of people, and you know, Imena Neely Mealy, right? If we are not for ourselves, who will be for us? So we need to speak up for our needs and concerns as a senior community.
Rabbi Geller, there's a comment in there that I've actually, there's two actually now. There's two themes. One, Brenda wrote, at this age, you get tired of going to funerals and constantly hearing that friends are dying and people are dying that you know. And she puts, being 83, that time can be closer than I'm ready to face. So that's one issue. And then Andrea also has an issue. How do you overcome the issue of the yes boomer? Okay, so they're two separate areas.
Denial is very powerful, right? But there's one thing for sure, you're all going to die. As far as I know, the death rate is holding steady at 100%. You might be like Norman Lear and make it past 100. You might be like somebody who dies a lot earlier. You're going to die. And therefore, get over it. I mean, you are going to die. You need to plan for it. And it's very important. I'm jumping into what Rabbi Sacks is not asking me yet, but my interest in this began with conversations that I had in the synagogue, and one of the issues was about end-of-life decisions. And I discovered that the majority of active older ages in the congregation, I was part of a community organizing project where we talked to over 250 of them, and it turns out that the majority of people in my congregation had end-of-life directives. The majority of them had never shared them with their adult children or those friends that were going to be in the room when they were dying. And I know that Rabbi Sacks has experienced this. You probably have as well. There's nothing more toxic than when your beloved mother or father is dying and not able to articulate what his or her needs are, and the adult children have different views of it, and they fight about it, or they fight about money, or whatever it is that they're fighting about, and there is a toxic experience, so that they don't talk to each other anymore. One of the things, if we do have kids, we probably do want them to like each other. The best gift that you can give to the people you love is to plan for all of that. The book that I wrote, that Rabbi Sacks is going to ask me about, has a section on planning your funeral, how to do an end-of-life directive, what are the issues to think about, how to have those conversations. It's not easy. People would say, well, I'm ready to have the conversation, but my adult children don't want to. They say, Mom, are you sick? Is there something? Or they want to have the conversations, but I don't want to have the conversations because I don't want to have to deal with it, or I don't want to share my financial stuff with them, or whatever. The best gift that you can give is to be completely clear and to have set it all up before you die. So denial of death is a bad thing, and it's a stupid thing because it will only lead to exactly what you don't want your legacy to be. You don't want your legacy to be one of conflict among the people you love who come after you. So that's my answer. And again, the choices are, would you rather be dead or would you rather be alive and keep moving? And honestly, it is hard to go to a lot of funerals. I'd go to a lot of funerals, right? People more and more are creating celebrations of life while they're still alive. So another way to celebrate a big birthday, you turn 80, you turn 85, you turn 90, is to have a gathering and tell everybody that, you know, this is a celebration of my life. I want to hear it while I'm still alive. And or that you write an ethical will, also something that's described in the book, where you talk about what your values are, and you read that to the people that you care about while you're still alive, and you talk about it. And that way, you know, it's different than a funeral, right? You should be able to hear the lovely things that people are going to say about you. And you can make that a joyful thing. We've lived long enough that maybe we have wonderful things that people want to say about us. Maybe we should listen to it. So those are ways to deal with the truth that you're going to die. There's less time ahead than there was behind. How do you not only leave a legacy, but how do you live a legacy? That's the challenge of this stage of our life. So what was the other question? The other question was boomer. Okay. It turns out that while it is true that we experience generational conflict, and there's a sense of, you know, okay, boomers, you screwed up the world, get out of the way and let us take over. More and more, there's studies, a recent one done by the National NORC, I forget what it's called, research at the University of Chicago about intergenerational stuff. And it turns out that younger people actually want connections with older people. That's particularly true in communities of color. Jews is less so. Communities of color have experience of intergenerational living. And when you talk to people, they talk often about grandparents who were so significant in their life. On the other hand, as a rabbi, I'm sure Rabbi Sacks feels this as well. When I met with bar mitzvah kids when I was in the active rabbinate, and I would ask them sort of, who is the role model for you? Many of those kids talk about their grandparents. So the connection between generations is actually not as bad as media suggests that it is. And it turns out that older people also want connections with younger people. We want connections with younger people because, and here I could show you statistics, connections with younger people have actually measurable effects on our health and well-being. And this is a stage of life where Erik Erikson talked about generativity, where we want to give back, where what's important to us isn't so much acquiring things anymore, but it's really being able to make a difference in the life of a younger person. So it turns out that although that's what the media covers, it's not as true as you think it is. And the organization that Rabbi Sacks mentioned that I'm a part of, Co-Generate, you might want to write that down and go online and look at it. Co-Generate. It's an attempt to imagine ways that youngers and olders working together can make a difference in the world. And it's done some really amazing things. So I'm a solo ager. My husband is dead. And when he died, I, first of all, learned the word solo ager. I didn't know that word existed. When my husband and I wrote the book before he was sick, it didn't occur to me that I would grow old without him. But here I was, living alone in a very nice house, but not a fancy house. I don't live in Beverly Hills, but it's, you know, it's a nice enough house. I discovered that I hated living alone. And so I began to reach out to students to live with me. And now after, you know, it's been 5 years, I now live with a 30-year-old rabbinical student at the Hebrew Union College, which is where I went to seminary. And it's not just a tenant, although she pays me a little bit of money. She's my housemate. And we wrote a covenant about what it means to share a Jewish home. And we meet every 2 weeks. We begin our meetings by reading the covenant. Abraham and Sarah welcome. It's very Jewish. I mean, I'm a rabbi, she's a rabbinical student. And she has friends that come and hang out at the house. I go out with my friends. I come home, the place is filled with young people who are sitting on the floor playing Scrabble or who are making mead, whatever that is. The house is filled with life. Any of you who live alone, who might be in a position where you could imagine having somebody live with you, think about it. I mean, remember the Golden Girls? They all live together, right? This is a different kind of model. But it's an intergenerational model, which I think is quite interesting for those of us who have the homes or the interests. You have to be flexible. Sometimes there are dirty dishes in the sink, but I'm not such a good fallibus either. So you live with it. Okay, I've jumped around.
Well, we have thank you. There's so much wisdom there, and I'm made some notes and I'm processing. But you had mentioned your book, and I want to make sure that before we go to questions and answers, that you have a chance to talk about the book that is called Getting Good at Getting Older. And it is by Rabbi Geller and her late husband, Richard Siegel. Some of you may recognize his name because he was a co-creator of the Jewish Catalog series, which was very helpful to me and sustained me, a book full of wisdom and ideas and opportunities. And he was just a wonderful man as well. I met him on any number of occasions. The book we are going to be discussing as in our 5th session of this series. It'll be on a Wednesday night, March 20th. And I hope that you'll all come for that. But before we do, I wanted to, not just because it's a teaser, but I think it's important. Rabbi Geller, you are really looked to as somebody with great wisdom as an elder on aging. And you wrote this book, and I wondered what motivated you to write the book, Getting Good at Getting Older? And what did you learn about yourself or about aging from the process of writing the book with Richard Siegel, Zichrono Livracha?
So first of all, I'm holding up the cover of the Jewish Catalog. It was published in 1993. How many of you remember the book? Raise your hand. How many of you baked your first challah from a recipe in the book? How many of you tied tzitzit at some kid's bar bat mitzvah from the book? How many of you actually built a sukkah from the instructions in the book? By the way, it's not such a good way to build a sukkah because it kept falling down. Okay, so this was 1993. That was the 60s and the 70s. And now we're in our 60s and 70s. And Rich felt that just as we needed a toolkit in the 70s to help us take Judaism back into our own hands, that we are the experts and the curators of our own Jewish life. That was radical at the time. At that time, those of you who grew up in conventional synagogues, the rabbi was the authority figure. The energy around this that led to the Jewish Catalog really changed all that and really changed North American Jewish life. It was a toolkit. It had a sense of humor. It had little, drawings in it. And you didn't read it from beginning to end. You looked at it when there was a particular, you wanted to learn about Jewish holidays, or you wanted to, go to Israel, okay. So Rich felt that just as we needed a toolkit then, we need one now to help us navigate the challenges and the opportunities of growing older. So you'll notice when you open the book that it looks a lot on the inside like the Jewish catalog. The same color, no surprise. The same whimsical drawings, no surprise. The same sense of humor. So like in the section on planning a funeral, there's a section about tombstones. And there's a photograph of Maxine Menster's tombstone, which is somewhere in Iowa. And you look at it and it is a cookie recipe. It turns out that whenever somebody asked Maxine for her cookie recipe, she would respond, "Over my dead body." And so, you know, you have to have a sense of humor about all. So, so that was the first reason that we began thinking about writing the book. The other is, as I was coming close to my retirement, which was 7 years ago,
Right.
I noticed that a lot of people were leaving the congregation, these active older adults who felt that the synagogue wasn't speaking to them anymore. Their kids had been bar mitzvah, they were out of the house, whatever, and they were leaving the congregation. And so we did this community organizing project that I mentioned, and we asked people how they feel about this stage of life, what keeps them up at night, what their fears were, what their hopes were. And it was out of those conversations that all of the issues that ended up in the book came to be. Richie was healthy when we started the book. We worked on it for 2 years. When we wrote the section on funeral planning, we interviewed all the Jewish funeral directors in the city of Los Angeles. When we didn't know something, we've got a friend to write it. So there's a section on how relationships change, intimate relationships change as you grow older. And, we invited people who are experts in that, or people who are experts on dealing with adult children, or, all those kinds of issues. So some of it is written by us, some of it is written by other people. Rich wrote an article that was called Living in the Land of the Sick. And he was fine, but he was writing about visiting the sick and all that. And then he got cancer. And then he rewrote that chapter from the vantage point of somebody who now had a life-threatening illness. And it's very moving to see how his feelings change. Someday many of us are going to be sick, and he writes about that with real openness. So that is what prompted the writing of the book. He died before it was finished, and my last promise to him was that I would finish the book, and I did. And since that time, I've been going around, particularly during the pandemic, speaking to groups like yours, synagogue groups, JCC groups, about getting good at getting older. And what I've learned is that if you have a conversation that you want to have, a pandemic is a good time to have it, because all of these synagogues needed programs, right? And so I was a good hour program, just like Rabbi Sacks thought I would be a good program for you. It's and it doesn't cost the synagogue any money to bring me, because I wasn't going anywhere. I was doing it from my own study. It's not such a good time for selling books, because if I were inventor right now, and if you liked what I was saying, you would want to buy a book, I would sign your book, that isn't going to happen. But what did happen is I spoke to over 100 synagogues around the country, and the same kinds of issues kept coming up. People are wrestling with the same thing. So one thing that would often come up is, my kids don't want my stuff. What am I going to do with my stuff? I have all this stuff in my house. They don't want it. They have their own houses. What am I going to do with it? And some of us have our parents' stuff in our garage. Sorry. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with that? So we would talk about that, and it would turn out that Joel had already decluttered, and Daryl would hear Joel talk about what he did, and then after the Zoom, the two of them would get together and they would maybe form a group to talk about decluttering. Maybe there would be something that happened among the people on the call. And it turns out that while I've written this book, and I thank Rabbi Sacks for suggesting that I'm an expert in all of this, the truth is you guys are all experts in all of this, because you are in fact getting older, and you're getting good at getting older, and the things that you wrestle with are things that everybody does. So the fact that you can be having these conversations, is really important. The book is a toolkit. You don't read it from beginning to end. You pick it up when you have a specific issue that you want to deal with. So I'm curious, Rabbi Sacks, that when you do speak about the book in that session, to see how you're going to do that, because there are so many different themes that you could use. And I would just be curious, because however you find is useful, I'm going to share with others. So
Yeah,
that's why we wrote the book, and that's why I hope that you will actually read the book, because I think you might find it helpful. A lot of people have told me that they have.
yeah. So we are hoping that and I had actually mentioned this to you before, Rabbi Geller, that when we have our live session coming up, we will be having a wellness bag that we'll be giving to people that are able to come to that day, that particular session, and your book will be will be in the wellness bag. And that will be before our final session when we actually use the book. So people who want to peruse it will have a chance to at least know a little bit about how the book is structured. They might have looked at a couple of sections that spoke to them, and we'll be using the book in a way. And we don't know exactly what we're going to do yet, because we want it to be, in some ways, to use the book as a response to all the sessions that you and my other colleagues will be leading us through before that session. So
Great.
yeah, just so you know.
And-
We are
and
unfortunately.
when I meet some of you in Los Angeles or whatever, bring the book and I would be happy to sign it.
Thank you, Rabbi Geller. We are running out of time. If anybody does have a very important final question, you're welcome to either raise your hand virtually or physically, or you could put it into the chat. And if we don't have a question, I want to, and I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I do want to, I'm going to turn it over to Fran for a very quick, a couple of announcements, but I want to personally thank my my colleague, my friend and teacher, Rabbi Geller, for being here for this powerful session of its own, but also as a very special kickoff to a whole important series of discussions and thinkings about framing the way we think about our own aging and each other's aging, and how we as a community can keep getting good and better at getting older. So
can I just make one final conclusion remark?
Sure, please, Rabbi.
All of you know that the story of the Jewish people begins with the words from Genesis, and Yud He Vav He said to Avram, Lech Lecha, go, really go, from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great. Now, in my way of reading that text, Yud He Vav He spoke to both Avram and Sarai, right? It's a more of an egalitarian experience. But the important thing to notice is that Avram and Sarai were not millennials. They were seasoned adults, still fruitful in the fullness of age. They heard an invitation to explore their next stage, and that certainly led to a blessing. So my prayer for all of you is may you hear the invitation at this stage of your life. And may we become that blessing for ourselves, for our whole community, and for the larger world. Thank you for including me.
Amen. Toda rabah, Yasher Koach, for an amazing hour plus. So appreciate you and what you've brought to us today, Rabbi Geller. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Fran, I'm going to turn it over to you for the announcements that you have.
So the next, I thank you, Rabbi Geller. There's so much to talk about. You're amazing. Our next session will be next Wednesday at 4 p.m. via Zoom. It'll be Rabbi Richard Address, founder and director of Jewish Sacred Aging. And he's going to explore social aspects of aging, including creating new relationships and strengthening current ones in families and communities. And then our live event that Rabbi Sacks mentioned will be March 2nd, Saturday, March 2nd, during our Shabbat services. But it will be live and also live stream for people. That will be a YouTube link that you will get. And that begins at 10 a.m. And you can look at our website, congregationamhayam.com, for the remaining sessions in this very important series. So thank you, Rabbi Geller, for getting us off to such a good start. And thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us. Hope to see you at future events.
Thank you. Lehitra Ot, Kol Tov, Shalom.
You.